So we're going to be beginning the book of 3rd Nephi, okay, which with 3rd Nephi chapter 1.
Now it came to pass that the 91st year had passed away, and it was 600 years from the time that Lehi left Jerusalem, and it was in the year that Laconius was the chief judge and the governor over the land. And Nephi the son of Helaman had departed out of the land of Zarahemla, giving charge unto his son Nephi, who was his eldest son, concerning the plates of brass, and all the records which had been kept, and all those things which had been kept sacred from the departure of Lehi out of Jerusalem. Then he departed out of the land, and whither he went no man knoweth, and his son Nephi did keep the records in his stead, yea, the record of this people.
So now the 91st year has gone by, right? So you see kind of where the point we're arriving at, and so it's now 600 years from the time Lehi left Jerusalem, which is again a key point because it was said way back that by Lehi, 600 years from now, the Christ is going to come, the Messiah. So that's why it's saying 600 years have now passed since Lehi, 91 years since the reign of the judges began. Okay, so this is the time frame we're talking about. And now we have a little changing of the guard here, which says that the Nephi we've been following for the past few chapters, Nephi, who was the son of Helaman, as you see in verse 2, had departed out of the land of Zarahemla, right? And so he turned over the business, basically, to his own son, which was also named Nephi. So he's giving charge to son Nephi concerning the plates of brass and all the records and so forth. It says that he departed out of the land and it basically was never heard of again by these people. The plates of brass with all the prophecies and the Old Testament records were turned over, and basically the whole history of the Nephite people, right, which included all the wars and contentions, included all things that Nephi had written, and Lehi, and Mosiah, and Alma, and all that, right, because it was all kept together, which was good, good planning, really, good organization, right, if it was all splintered and all over the place, then they never could have come together into one book, so there was always the case there was one set of records that they were keeping, right? I mean, for a while there were two, but it was still one collection of records that they had, so that there was always one person in charge of it, right? And in particular, here's a lot of the ones who were in charge of it, right? I mean, at first it was Nephi back at the beginning, and then he gave it to his son Jacob, and Jacob gave it to his son, and it passed to a few people. But then finally that family line kind of ran out, so that it got to the last one who didn't have a son, and so he said, hey, I'm going to give it to King Benjamin to take care of, and so he did. And so then we started kind of following down. That King Benjamin gave it to his son Mosiah. Mosiah passed it to Alma, and Alma to his son Helaman, and Helaman had a son Shibwan. Shibwan had a son Helaman. Helaman had a son Nephi, and now this Nephi has a son Nephi, who's I'm going to add at the bottom in a minute here. All right, so these were all ones that had the records, and at the time they were the record keeper, they had it all. Right, they didn't just have their own book or just a couple random things. They had everything. So everything from 600 BC all the way down to when they were living, they had it all. So as you can see, it was a very responsible assignment, right? Because if you lose it, you lose everything, right? There were no, as far as I can tell, there were no backup copies, or unlike today, we're blessed to have things like computers and or even for paper copy machines, right? So that you can make copies and you can keep copies here and there, and the computers would do backups and off-site backups and the whole 9 yards to make sure you don't lose your information and your records. Well, here they only had one set of records, so it was very important that whoever was entrusted with those had to protect them because it was the only copy. So that's what this Nephi is getting at, right? So it says in the end of 2, so all the records have been kept, all those things which have been kept sacred from the departure of Lehi out of Jerusalem, right? So then this Nephi departs, and his son Nephi did keep the records in his stead, the record of his people. So now he's the new record keeper. So this 3rd Nephi, the book of Nephi, that's written by this particular Nephi, who was the son of Nephi, who was the son of Helaman. Okay, so now this Nephi is now the new record keeper, Nephi, the son of Nephi, who was the son of Helaman.
And it came to pass that in the commencement of the 92nd year, behold, the prophecies of the prophets began to be fulfilled more fully, for there began to be greater signs and greater miracles wrought among the people. But there were some who began to say that the time was past for the words to be fulfilled, which were spoken by Samuel the Lamanite. And they began to rejoice over their brethren, saying, behold, the time is past, and the words of Samuel are not fulfilled. Therefore your joy and your faith concerning this thing hath been vain.
Right, so as I said earlier, kind of the end of 91 years was the key point that they were looking for. So now year 92 is beginning. And so as it says here, that says the prophecies began to be fulfilled more fully. They were seeing more things happening. It says greater signs and greater miracles run on the people. So it seems like things are progressing towards where they would want to be, right? But when you have some people who don't want to believe, well, then they're going to make a way to reinforce the fact that they shouldn't believe, right? So what was the strategy here in verses 5 and 6? Saying time's up, right? It should have happened by now, so if it hasn't happened yet, it's not going to happen, all right? Time's up. If you remember, Samuel the Lamanite, about 5 years before this, said, in 5 years, this is what's going to happen, right? So I guess they knew enough to, okay, 5 years, okay, this is 5 years, so it's been 5 years, so it's about time that this should have happened, right? And so that it hasn't happened yet. So see, the prophecy was wrong. And you know, if you think about it, I mean, if you think somebody is a false prophet, right, and they make some prediction, especially one that's open-ended, right, well, I mean, really the only way that a prophet can be proven to be false is that what they prophesy doesn't happen, right? That's the way you prove it, right? They probably, well, if there's no time frame to it, you just say, you know, someday Christ is going to come. Well, then how do you ever know that it was false? Because you can always say, well, it's not yet. It's, you know, it just hasn't happened yet. It's next year. It's 5 years, 10 years, whatever, right? But so they can never be wrong because it can always just be either it didn't happen yet. So that's why they're trying to bring closure to it, those who didn't believe, and say, well, he said 5 years, right? Well, now 5 years have passed, didn't happen. See, he was wrong, okay? And then it's not going to happen because 5 years have passed, and we don't see any sign, we don't see any day and day with no day and night and day with no darkness. Okay, we don't see that happening. So the time's up. So see, he was wrong. In 6, and they began to rejoice over their brethren. You know, it's mean, right? It's, you know, see, time's up. Ha ha! It didn't happen. See, we were right. You were wrong.
And it came to pass that they did make a great uproar throughout the land, and the people who believed began to be very sorrowful, lest by any means those things which had been spoken might not come to pass. But behold, they did watch steadfastly for that day and that night and that day, which should be as one day, as if there were no night, that they might know that their faith had not been vain.
I see. So it says those who were the believers. I mean, you know, obviously you can't help but be affected by all this in-your-face taunting, right? And so they were very, you know, sorrowful, and that they were, you know, they were a little concerned that it wasn't happening yet. And you know, that as much faith as you have, you always, you know, faith is evidence of things not seen. So you know, until it happens, you're like, well, yeah, I'm pretty sure it's going to happen, and I really think it's going to happen, but you know, but it would be nice if it would happen, right? And then so as time is passing, they're getting perhaps a little nervous. But you know, as you see in verse 8, it says that they weren't giving up. It says they did watch steadfastly for the sign that was predicted, the day and the night and the day, as if it should be one day and no night, right? And that was the sign. That was the key sign. And see, all the other ones, all the other ones, maybe they could say, well, this is a coincidence, or this, you know, didn't really mean that, or whatever. But this was the one that was going to be the big sign, right? Because there was no way you could fake it. I mean, if it's nighttime and the sun's gone down, and then it's still broad daylight, all right, there's no way anybody could rig that, all right? If that happens, then that's the sign, so that's the one that they were really looking for.
Now it came to pass that there was a day set apart by the unbelievers, that all those who believed in those traditions should be put to death, except the sign should come to pass, which had been given by Samuel the prophet. Now it came to pass that when Nephi, the son of Nephi, saw this wickedness of his people, his heart was exceedingly sorrowful. And it came to pass that he went out and bowed himself down upon the earth, and cried mightily to his God in behalf of his people, yea, those who were about to be destroyed, because of their faith in the tradition of their fathers.
These mean people, all right, who were determined to prove the prophecy was false, and didn't want people to be holding on, trying to believe in this and waiting for the sign to happen. They picked a day, right? They picked a day. So let's say, you know, today is whatever today is. Today's Wednesday, right? So it says, okay, if it doesn't happen by next Friday, right, then anybody who says they believe in this, we're going to kill them, right? So we're going to execute you if you still insist that you're going to believe, right? So you have until next Friday for the sign to happen, right? Or whatever day was picked, all right? It doesn't say how long the day was. It was tomorrow, I don't know, all right? But they picked a day, and they said, if it doesn't happen by that day, and you still say you believe in it, then we're going to kill you. Right? So one way or the other, once that day passes, we're not going to have to worry about anybody believing this anymore, because either you're going to recant or we're going to kill you, all right? So there's not going to be anybody left believing after that day. So that was their way of ending it, and said that this is the last day we're going to put up with this. So now, as you see in 10 and 11, Nephi, the son of Nephi, right? In hearing this, says this is not good, right? And again, these are, it says, so the wickedness of his people, right? Again, these are the fellow Nephites, right? We're going to kill our own Nephite brothers and sisters here because we don't want to hear this particular prophecy anymore, right? So that's why it says his heart was exceedingly sorrowful, right? And so when you become sorrowful like that, there's the one place you can turn to God. And that's just what he did. It says that he bowed himself down to the earth, cried mightily to God on behalf of his people, praying for those who were about to be destroyed because of their faith, right? Those who were going to be killed. And so he says, to protect my people here. They're believing in the prophecy that you sent down, the prophecy that was passed down through all of our fathers, and the prophecy given by Samuel the Lamanite. Right, so they're just believing in the prophecy. So come on, God, you got to protect the people. You got to make a way for them to not be killed for believing in this.
And it came to pass that he cried mightily unto the Lord all the day. And behold, the voice of the Lord came unto him, saying, Lift up your head, and be of good cheer. For behold, the time is at hand, and on this night shall the sign be given, and on the morrow come I into the world, to show unto the world that I will fulfill all that which I have caused to be spoken by the mouth of my holy prophets. Behold, I come unto my own, to fulfill all things which I have made known unto the children of men from the foundation of the world, and to do the will both of the Father and of the Son, of the Father because of me, and of the Son because of my flesh. And behold, the time is at hand, and this night shall the sign be given.
So after Nephi cried mightily unto the Lord all day long, right? So again, notice it wasn't just a quick whispered prayer here, right? He was crying unto the Lord all day long. And so the response you see is, be of good cheer, because guess what? It's going to happen tonight, all right? This is the day. This is the day. So tonight, when the sun goes down, it's not going to get dark, just like was foretold, all right? Tonight's the night. It's going to happen. And when that happens, as was foretold, that means tomorrow is the day that I'm going to be born into flesh, okay? So I mean, it's a great answer to the prayer, right? To even comfort him to know that, okay, tonight it's going to happen. So this way, don't worry, right? You don't have to be afraid. The people aren't going to be killed because the sign is coming tonight. And tonight everybody's going to see it, right? And so, as you see in 14, it says, then I'll come and fulfill all the things which I made known to the children of men, right? And that's God taking on flesh. This is because the Father because of me, the Son because of my flesh. The time has finally arrived, and tonight the sign is going to be given.
And it came to pass that the words which came unto Nephi were fulfilled, according as they had been spoken. For behold, at the going down of the sun there was no darkness, and the people began to be astonished, because there was no darkness when the night came. And there were many who had not believed the words of the prophets, who fell to the earth, and became as if they were dead. For they knew that the great plan of destruction which they had laid for those who believed in the words of the prophets had been frustrated, for the signal which had been given was already at hand. And they began to know that the Son of God must shortly appear, yea, in fine, all the people upon the face of the whole earth, from the west to the east, both in the land north and in the land south, were so exceedingly astonished that they fell to the earth. For they knew that the prophets had testified of these things for many years, and that the sign which had been given was already at hand, and they began to fear because of their iniquity and their unbelief.
He heard it said, Nephi did, he heard the words of the Lord saying that tonight's the night. And so, as you see in 15, it says, and what was said came to pass, all right? It wasn't just words, but that sure enough, it says that night, at the going down of the sun, there was no darkness, and the people, says, began to be astonished, because there was no dark when the night came, and of course they would be, right? First of all, it would be odd no matter what, right? To see the sun go down and it's not dark, but since they all were very well aware of what the prophecy was, and that and all this contention over it better happen by this date, or else we're gonna kill you. So you can imagine how the people would feel upon putting people in that position and say, oh, there's no way it's gonna happen, and I'm so sure that I'm gonna kill you if it doesn't happen by this date. And then lo and behold, it happens exactly as it was foretold. Right? Exactly what Samuel said was going to happen happened. It says that the sun went down, then there's no darkness. So you see their reaction, right? It says that says that the people who hadn't believed the words of the prophets fell to the earth and became as if they were dead, right? Okay, well, yeah, I mean, how do you even handle that, right? Knowing that God has really spoken and you were ready to kill the messenger, right? And kill those who were going to believe, and yet now you were wrong and they were right. And so you see this, so yeah, that's how they handle it. It says they felt that they were dead. It says the great plan of destruction was frustrated because the sign was given, right? And knowing what that sign meant. The sign meant that the Son of God was coming to earth, just as was foretold, and that even that there was such a thing as the Son of God. Remember, because a lot of people didn't even think there was such a thing as the Son of God, and that it was being foretold. So all that stuff. So not only am I wrong about the sun goes down and there's no darkness, but I'm wrong about the Son of God. It's all happening just as I was told. And so whatever they were afraid of before, they're more afraid now, because now I have to get right with God, because I was wrong and I was denying that the Son of God was coming, and now he's here.
And it came to pass that there was no darkness in all that night, but it was as light as though it was midday. And it came to pass that the sun did rise in the morning again, according to his proper order, and they knew that it was the day that the Lord should be born, because of the sign which had been given. And it had come to pass, yea, all things every whit, according to the words of the prophets. And it came to pass also that a new star did appear, according to the word. And it came to pass that from this time forth there began to be lyings sent forth among the people by Satan, to harden their hearts, to the intent that they might not believe in those signs and wonders which they had seen. But notwithstanding these lyings and deceivings, the more part of the people did believe, and were converted unto the Lord.
Just continuing with what they were witnessing, right? As you can see in 19, it says it came to pass there was no darkness all that night. It says it was light as though it was midday. And the next morning, as would be expected, the sun came up, so they could see the sun coming up, all right? I mean, of course, it was still light, right? It had been light all night, but the sun came up, and it didn't make any difference for the daylight, because the daylight was already there. But then, of course, the next day is just like a normal day once the sun comes up, but everybody knew what had happened during that night, that the sun went down and there was still daylight. Okay, so they saw that, and therefore they knew that, yep, today is the day that the Lord's going to be born, because this is what was foretold. It mentioned about in 21 about there was a new star that appeared, and it's again the same star that we read about in the Bible. That the new star was there, and that was foretold by Samuel the Lamanite also, that a new star would come. So yet another sign came to pass. Right now you'd say, well, you would think that this would finally put to rest the opposition to it, right? But of course it's never the case, all right? As you can see in 22, it says lyings were sent forth among the people by Satan to harden their hearts, that they might not believe in the signs and wonders. All right, what was the reaction of the people in general to these lyings, though? Unlike the other time, all right, where it says that here's Samuel gave the prophecy, and they couldn't hit him with the arrows or the rocks, and that so some people believed, but the most part didn't. When some of the signs started to come about, again, the ones who already believed were okay with it. The ones who didn't still didn't believe, right? But here now it's turned around now, right? So now that even though these lyings and deceivings were sent out, different stories given as to why it. I can't imagine how they could explain this away, though, right? How the sun could go down and it's still daylight, but somehow they tried to make up some kind of a story that didn't involve the Son of God being born. But now it says that more part of the people did believe and were converted unto the Lord, so they weren't buying it anymore. They saw it for what it was. It's just a big lie to deceive them.
And it came to pass that Nephi went forth among the people, and also many others, baptizing unto repentance, in the which there was a great remission of sins. And thus the people began again to have peace in the land. And there were no contentions, save it were a few that began to preach, endeavoring to prove by the Scriptures that it was no more expedient to observe the law of Moses. Now in this thing they did err, having not understood the Scriptures. But it came to pass that they soon became converted, and were convinced of the error which they were in, for it was made known unto them that the law was not yet fulfilled, and that it must be fulfilled in every whit. Yea, the word came unto them that it must be fulfilled. Yea, that one jot or tittle should not pass away, till it should all be fulfilled. Therefore in this same year were they brought to a knowledge of their error, and did confess their faults.
Right, so since the more part of the people believed, it says, Nephi was now able to go about baptizing people, to baptize them unto repentance, it's a great remission of sins, and it was a little more peaceful in the land than what they had experienced more recently. All right, now in 24 and 25, it talks about just a little little glitch in the belief, right, that had to be straightened out. As you can see, it says there were people who began to preach that it was no longer necessary to observe the law of Moses. Now, when you remember what the law of Moses is, the law of Moses was, a series of rules, if you will, right, things that you couldn't do or you had to do, and so yeah, there was work to do to keep that, right, and so it had probably always been taught that when Christ comes, then that's done away with, all right. So Christ is here, right? So we don't have to keep it anymore, and it's not necessary, right? But what was the error in that way of thinking? Because the real fulfillment of the law of Moses was his crucifixion, right? Because up until then, the only way to be forgiven of sins really was you had to do sacrifices, or they sacrifice animals and such. And but Jesus is referred to as the last sacrifice, and when he would be crucified on the cross, then no more sacrifices are needed. The law of Moses is then fulfilled. So that's the real moment that they would be waiting for that would be when Jesus would be crucified, and then that they would put in his place what he taught about keep the two great commandments, love God above all, love your neighbor as yourself, right? It was going to replace the law of Moses once he was departed, right? So, but until then, the law of Moses was still active. So that was the error, right? That's why he said that they were anxious to get rid of the law of Moses. Okay, Jesus is here, let's get rid of the law of Moses. But no, not yet, be patient, right? When Jesus fulfills the law, then the law of Moses ceases, and then the law of Christ takes over.
And thus the 92nd year did pass away, bringing glad tidings unto the people because of the signs which did come to pass, according to the words of the prophecy of all the holy prophets. And it came to pass that the 93rd year did also pass away in peace, save it were for the Gadianton robbers, who dwelt upon the mountains, who did infest the land, for so strong were their holds and their secret places, that the people could not overpower them. Therefore they did commit many murders, and did do much slaughter among the people.
Right, so we see the end of year 92 and then the year 93. So these are the first couple of years now after Jesus was born. All right, and so for the most part, as you see in the verse 26, it says, the glad tidings on the people because the signs which came to pass. So, at first it's a time of rejoicing over the signs being given about the birth of Christ, right? But, you think about it though, and so, well, again, the signs given, people are happy, but as we said earlier, they don't see Jesus. There's no visible evidence that he's there. So once the initial euphoria is over, well then I guess they're going to go back to real life now, or what you might call real life, and in some cases that was not necessarily doing what was right in the sight of God. So that you see in 27 now, it says in year 93, right, it says there were some of the Gadianton robbers now, it says dwelt on the mountains, and they were committing murders and doing slaughter among the people. So they weren't converted, right, so they were still, it was business as usual for them, and still trying to now influence other people.
And it came to pass that in the 94th year they began to increase in a great degree, because there were many dissenters of the Nephites who did flee unto them, which did cause much sorrow unto those Nephites who did remain in the land. And there was also a cause of much sorrow among the Lamanites, for behold, they had many children who did grow up and began to wax strong in years, that they became for themselves, and were led away by some who were Zoramites, by their lyings and their flattering words, to join those Gadianton robbers. And thus were the Lamanites afflicted also, and began to decrease as to their faith and righteousness, because of the wickedness of the rising generation.
Now in year 94, it says it's still following up on the Gadianton robbers. It says they were beginning to increase in great degree, and they were making inroads among the other people. Right? It says now both Nephites and Lamanites, as it says in verse 28 and then 29, it says and 30, it says that both Nephites and Lamanites were affected. They were expanding their own base of operations, and I guess when something good happens, well then something evil has to try to happen to counter it, right? So that's what you see happening here, is that they're now going after perhaps those who were younger and trying to influence them to be part of this Gadianton robber movement, right? And as you can see towards in 30, right, it says the Lamanites were afflicted by the fact that even some of their people were wrong. The Lamanites were the righteous ones going into this time frame. But says they began to decrease in their faith and righteousness because of the wickedness of the rising generation. And when I read that, I thought of, sometimes today we can make those kind of statements. It's always the case of you look at the next generation coming up and you say, oh, I don't know about these young people, or I don't know about this this new generation. And so that's what I picture them doing here, is them looking at their young people and saying, oh, I don't know about this rising generation, right? They're being influenced by these robbers, and I don't know what's going to become of them, and what's it going to do to us as a nation. You know, they're concerned about that. So even as, you know, the early years here after Christ being born, there's still challenges, and they're still going to face a lot of challenges in this, because the evil hasn't just gone away. I mean, it was pushed back by them seeing the sign, but those who were evil are still going to continue to be evil and try to influence the other people.